Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is Return to Astral Guide School. Before we get into it, just want to mention that if you'd like to support the work of Astral Club, you can do so in Patreon. You get advanced episodes on Sunday, a library of downloaded episodes that you can put on your podcast app, and of course, there's a Patreon email where we can talk back and forth. And if you're interested, there's a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to learn to astral project, be glad to work with you. All you have to do is just email me for information, and that email is also in the description. Recently, I left my body and got a surprise. Waiting there for me was my angel guide. And I hadn't seen him in a while. And he was there in all of his glory, as he usually is, giving me this weird, sardonic look. And I said, hello. What can I do for you? He said, well, what do you think about returning to Astral Guide School? I said, yeah, listen, I'm not interested in going back to Astral Guide School. I've kind of had my fill of that experience for right now, but thanks anyway. He looked at me and he wasn't surprised, I could tell. He said, well, I thought you were going to say that. So instead, I've assigned an acolyte to you. I said, what? Wait a minute, what did you assign to me? And just then, a young man wearing a robe. It was a dark robe with the typical hood, which gave me some bad memories. And he was obviously young looking, very short hair, with a very innocent looking type face. And my angel guide said, this is going to be your acolyte. It's going to be your job to train him, since you don't have any interest in going back to Astral Guide School. I said, wait a minute. I appreciate it, but I don't need an assistant or an acolyte or whatever you want to call them. And then my angel guide just looked at me and said, I'll be sending you to Ukraine, so have fun there and teach him the ropes. And then he disappeared. And the next thing I knew, we were both standing in a destroyed city in what I assume was the Ukraine. I looked at my young acolyte, and before I could say anything, he said, I've heard a lot about you. My name is... And I said, let me stop you right there. I don't need your name. We're not friends. You can tag along, just stay out of the way, and don't get in any trouble. And we'll be just fine. He just nodded his head, and I started walking through what was only described as an apocalyptic scene. This city, I have no idea where it was in Ukraine. My guess is there's a lot of these cities now in Ukraine that are destroyed and nothing but rubble and waste everywhere, and just awful, awful things. So I said, let's just look for any souls that are trapped here that we can help. He just nodded his head. I thought to myself, okay, well, so far at least he can follow simple instructions. So at least that's something. We walked for a bit when we came upon it was a Russian soldier. I could tell by the uniform and the flag that was on his sleeve. He was pissed off. He was angry. I could see that right away. And I went up to him and I said to him, what's your name? And he said, Vasily Blat. I didn't know exactly what that second word meant, but I know he used it quite a lot during our conversation. I'm not going to use it as much as he did because it gets a little old. It's hard for me to understand words or even telepathically if there's too much anger behind them because it blocks the telepathic transmission. And that's my best pronunciation based on what I think he was saying. Perhaps somebody who's familiar with Russian can explain to me what that word means. I said, well, why don't you tell me your story? I figure if I could get him talking, maybe I could reduce the anger within him. Because if someone's furious, or if they're full of hatred, or even if they're deeply depressed, I can't help them. I can't help them move on if they're trapped in these extreme emotions. It keeps them too low in the vibratory phase. So I thought, well, let's get him talking and maybe that'll help. He went on to say, I reported when I got the draft notice. Blat. He said it again. They said they wanted to verify my information. That was it. And that, we might be just called up as reservists. Then they gave us a list of things that we should buy in case we were called. Now, I remember my time in the Air Force. And if the Air Force had given me a list of things I had to buy so that I could serve, I would have been not too happy with that. But I assume that that's something that is happening currently in Russia due to the extreme losses in men and material that they have suffered. Anyway, he said, when I reported back a few days later, they told us we were going for some training. That's it. We wouldn't leave Russia. He went on, he said, we got a few weeks of training. I think he said like around 2 weeks. That's the idea I got. And then he said, I shot a rifle only 2 times. Blat. Then they took us to the front and dumped us in some woods with nothing to eat or drink. We stayed there for days. Then we were being constantly mortared by the ho-hos. That was another word that there was so much anger behind, I couldn't get the idea, but I assume it's a bad word or some sort of a slang term for the Ukrainians. He went on to say, I remember the rounds were getting closer. Then everything went black and I was here. He was still vibrating lowly with so much anger. I said, well, go on. What else has happened to you? And all he could say is, someone is going to pay for these lies. Blat. I'm going to call home and report how badly we were treated. Someone will be prosecuted. He went on and on and on like this. And plenty more of that slang term that he kept on using over and over again. That curse, it must have been a curse word, obviously. I couldn't get another word in edgewise. He was so trapped in his anger that I decided we had to move on. Whenever you're in a situation like this, in basically a battleground, you got to use spiritual triage. When somebody is this angry with this much hatred, you can't get through to them. And you can't get them to let it go until they're ready. And he obviously was not ready to let go his anger and feeling of betrayal. So I looked at the kid next to me and I said, we got to move on. He looked at me with a questioning response, but I gave him a sharp look and he kept quiet. So we walked on. As we were looking for another soul to help, I was explaining to the kid that what I just explained to you, that, there are some spirits here we're not going to be able to help because they're trapped in too much very lowly vibrating emotions. And if we can't get to them, we can't get through them, then we have to move on and see who we can help. We wondered about more, I was glad I didn't have a physical body, because we were able to walk through all of this rubble that was lying in the streets. It was just a mess. One destroyed house after another. Such senseless violence. For what purpose? It's just, it beggars the imagination. War is a ridiculous and a useless activity to begin with. But a war like this, based on lies from beginning to end, where people are suffering needlessly for the vanity of one man, perhaps, it's just sad. But as I said, we just continued to look for anyone we could help. We helped a few other folks, but I don't want to get into them right now. Instead, I'm going to talk about this child that we found. He was huddled up in basically a part of a destroyed house, and he was crying. He was obviously sad, and so I knelt down and got eye level with him, and I said, "Son, what is your name?" And through his sobs, he said, "Anton." I said, "What's wrong, Anton?" He said, "I'm lost." He probably was about 4 or 5 years old, is my guess. He said, "I can't find my mama." And, it was just so sad. And at that moment, my acolyte, the kid, just disappeared. And I thought to myself, great. That was a great assistant. Thanks a lot for nothing, angel guide. But I still had a soul here that I had to deal with. And so I bent down and, I embraced him. And I said, "It's going to be all right. Can you tell me about your mama? What's her name?" And he looked at me and said, "Mama." I thought, of course, what else would I get from a 4 or 5-year-old? And I said, "When's the last time you saw your mama?" He said, "I remember she was in the house, and I went outside to play. She said to stay really close to the house, but I think I went a little too far. And then the explosions started happening, and I ran home. But our home was gone. I couldn't find it. I don't know where my mama is. Why doesn't she come for me?" I asked him then what happened after he couldn't find his mama. And he said, "There were more loud noises, and I don't know what happened, but I think I got hurt. Can you help me find my mama?" Well, I'd be lying to you if I said that, I was trying to control my own emotions at this point. But all I could do was just embrace the child and ask him to calm down, that everything would be okay, and that he should dry his tears and just, become calmer, and that we would, find his mother, and that I would help him to move to a better place. And just then, I was surprised, because the kid popped up with a woman in tow. And the woman cried out, "Anton," and he cried out, "Mama," and they embraced. And they just held each other and, cried. And obviously, we just reunited a mother and a son who had passed away in this heinous attack on a civilian city. As I watched with the kid, the mother continued to comfort the child, and then they both disappeared. And I can only assume that they then moved on together. So these are the experiences I wanted to talk about. There were a few others, but these were the ones that I think were the most deeply affecting to me. And I wanted to share because they were two very different types of experience. I'm very glad we were able to help two souls move on in this particular case. But unfortunately, we weren't able to help the Russian soldier because he still was too trapped in his anger. I looked at the kid and I said, "Hey, not a bad job. What did you say your name was again?" Well, if you liked that experience, please hit the like button. Share it with those of like mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that bell is solid so that you get notified on Wednesday and Saturday when there's new episodes. And please leave your questions and comments. Would you have done anything differently? If you know any of those Russian terms that I mentioned, like blyat, whatever that was, and ho-ho, I'd appreciate that. Because like I said, there was too much anger behind them and I couldn't get the telepathic meaning. At any rate, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.